Hey everyone, welcome to this new episode of Spin Up and Speak Up. And this episode is focused on decentralized compute, how we are scaling it, deepen, and all of those things which you really need to know once you understand this market and the whole narrative around it. And I have some special guests with me, and there could be no other people best in the room right now who would speak about this. We have Russ from Exabits, and we have Jason from Datagram. Glad to have you folks on the stream. And like, sometimes I really jump into it, but for any of the viewers who is viewing this right now, there is this big question, and a lot of folks come to me and ask this in different Web 2 conferences. Why should I use decentralized compute? And I have been handling this question for quite some time, but I really want to know somebody who's very new to this segment and who's really have started to care about distributed compute, decentralized compute, and deepen. What are the things one needs to know and must have whilst thinking about decentralized compute?
Hey, I'll start with that, and then I get the same questions. I was just at a computer vision conference in Nashville, Tennessee, and people come up to me and goes, what is decentralized, distributed compute? And it really comes into play when you have companies that offer their AI services around the world, right? And everyone's into being a global provider today. And if you're doing that, you can't have your compute centralized. Oh, I'm going to offer computer vision services around the world in, Singapore and Japan and Asia, but all my GPU compute's going to be back over in America. That's going to introduce latency, and if you're in Europe, because of GDPR, they prefer their compute to be stationed in Europe.
Yeah.
So the idea of having that decentralized distributed compute is really important for those companies that play around the world, giving them options for in-country presence to reduce latency. And that's how companies like Exabits can help, because we work with about 30 data centers around the world, and so we can serve those needs.
And when you say 30 data centers around the world, so do you think like in terms of this geo, like I think there is a big demand from different regions. So do you go ahead and like how does the machine leasing work on that? Like what's your P0 on whenever, like, for example, a client from MENA lands in and a client from APAC lands in or US lands in. So you would focus on, like, because there is price power disparity as well, because you
Yeah.
would see like these machines are they do follow a singular rate structure, but as we say that there is this big Mac index, right? For different. Do you think that really follows for GPUs as well, or they really don't?
I think it does. There are people, and there's two ways to look at it too. There are people who are just looking for, a great GPU compute price, and there are certain regions in the world where the GPUs are less expensive, and if they're not latency intensive, they'll be like, fine, I'll rent GPUs from, Asia or Japan where they might be cheaper. Um, so that does happen, and working with those data centers allows us to be able to be flexible in providing compute, right? So if I have relationships, and it's not just the 30 data centers we work with probably, we have partnerships with 100. So if you come to me and say, hey, I need, and this is a real use case for me, somebody came to us and said, we need 500 L4s. I didn't have 500. I had about 70, 75. So we work with other data center partners and we said,
Yeah.
hey, do you have a bunch of L4s that we could manage? And together we were able to pool up, a cluster of 500. So that's where it helps too. And but I get a little bit nervous. If you guys saw the news this week, CoreWeave is spending nine
Both sides.
million
Yeah.
dollars to buy Core Scientific data centers. So I think the centralized providers are getting nervous, and they're starting to buy up data centers because they need power and they need supply. So in some ways, I don't know if it's a direct threat to us distributed decentralized providers, but it does force us to have to make sure that we do have relationships with data centers around the world. In Exabit specifically, we're not looking to go to build our stack upward and become an inferencing provider or a
Yeah.
generative AI provider. We're looking to go down and invest
Yeah.
in data center technology. Where can we build more data centers? Where can we, so that we don't become off guard when all the big data centers get gobbled up. So there's a lot going on in the marketplace with that right now.
And
I think it's
Jason,
an
what do you
interesting.
feel about this? Yep.
I think it's an interesting thing because Russ and I are weirdly at opposite ends, sort of the same spectrum. Because I'm actively trying to get things sort of out of data centers and more to the edge. Granted, use case is very different. You're not, and I've said this many times, you're not going to run super heavy inference in a massively distributed fashion. It doesn't make sense. You wouldn't have all that stuff in the same rack in a data center somewhere. But for a lot of other use cases, having things deployed in a very distributed fashion works in ways that it's never been able to work before. Because if you take the average home computer right now, or your mid-tier gaming rig, has way more power than the average user can even come close to consuming. And now, as we build networks of these sorts of machines out on the edge, we can actually do some pretty cool stuff in ways that 10 years ago would never have been possible. And so I think that it is interesting to watch the landscape change around data centers, and around, especially with the involvement of like the hyperscalers and things like that, because the GPU consumption out there is just getting absolutely wild. But for me, I still want to have as much stuff outside of data centers and in an entirely distributed fashion as much as possible.
But surprisingly, when we speak about that, like we see that a lot of customer base of these GPUs, like AWS CCP, is rooted from Web3 as well. Like once you see, like, okay,
Oh, it's terrible,
these
dude.
many people,
I
yeah,
it always bothered me. My previous project that I was involved in for a long time, something like 60-70% of the nodes that their community was operating were operating out of AWS. And
yeah,
it's like, okay, well, you can't have a decentralized network and then turn around and stick your decentralized network inside a singular freaking data center. It's just like,
Doesn't work that way.
what is even happening right now, guys?
yeah,
And so this is one of the things that makes me super excited about what we're doing at Datagram, and specifically with our node distribution these days. You want to see something cool?
Yeah.
yeah,
Can I share my
for
screen
sure.
really quick?
Yeah,
Let me
for
see if I
sure,
can
you
share a
can.
screen.
Yeah,
I'm going to show you guys this really quick because I'm super proud of this. So about 3 weeks ago, we launched our alpha testnet. And when we talk about distributed, this is what I'm talking about. So as of this minute, you guys see that okay? Yeah.
Yeah.
yeah,
As of this minute, we have 97,656 nodes online, right? And we can drill down in here and we can look at everywhere that these nodes are across the entire freaking world.
Yeah.
And this is really exciting to me because while there is some stuff in data centers, of course, obviously, because people, hire VPS providers and things like that,
yeah,
this is crazy distributed.
Yeah.
And I could not possibly be more excited, looking at this,
Yeah.
because this is so cool.
so
Sorry, I
these
just
are
wanted to
like different
brag
compute
about that.
machines.
Yeah, these are individual machines running our node software.
Yeah. So on that note, Jason, I mean, what's your take on this? Because I've seen a lot of people talk about the data center, kind of like the monolithic data centers changing, and one of the reasons why they can't support the power. Like
Yeah.
the Blackwell chip is 30% more power hungry than the H200, and so if you
Yeah,
simply go to a data center and change them all out, you won't have enough power. So I'm
Correct.
seeing a lot of talk on building, almost like, micro data centers, like, little data centers and pops in cities that, aren't, megawatts of power, but kilowatts of powers. And so you get a whole bunch of, distributed, decentralized data centers now that are like almost like mom and pop data centers, almost like nodes.
Yes,
So
yes.
there's a lot of talk about that.
That is definitely a thing that you're starting to see. I think you're still not you're not going to see stuff in the kilowatt scale. You will see stuff in the megawatt scale. I'm
Yeah.
actually involved in a project right now. I can't go into too much detail about it, but you and I should talk about it later when it's not a live stream, Russ. But it's essentially a 10 megawatt 10 megawatt installation,
Yeah.
and it's based there's places all over the world where you can pick up 10 megawatts of power from a power plant and build out smaller data centers. Like the sweet spot, if you look at what the hyperscalers are doing, the sweet spot for Amazon is about 50 megawatts. Okay. And they love to build these 50 megawatt centers. They're building 3 in Thailand right now. And those 50 megawatt centers, each of them runs about 30,000 H200. You can run about
Did we lose his?
No, he's back. 30,000 H200, did you say?
Yeah. So, sorry, it seems to be having a. So yeah, that's sort of about that. That's it, right. So out that 5 megawatts, can critically in a lot of places, which I think is an important thing, especially given sort of everything surrounding the entire AI inference and climate debate.
Yeah.
So how many machines do you think like these 10 megawatt many data centers would have, like in terms of nodes, in terms of different type?
A 10 megawatt data center will support about 6,000 H200s.
Damn, that's also big. Like in terms of,
I mean, it's
terms
still
of
big.
Web3
It's
usage?
still like
Yeah.
it's way off of the web. Like that's one of the things that you find out when you start, and Russ knows exactly what I'm talking about. This is when you look at Web3, we have a tendency to think of Web3 as being this big thing that's Web3. It's huge, it's great, it's the future. And then once you get outside of Web3, you realize how small Web3 really is.
Exactly.
And what your job is as somebody working in Web3, because we all work on Web3 because it's a passion for us, right?
Yeah.
Like I'm here because it matters to me, right? Otherwise I wouldn't be doing this.
Right.
But the reality is that your job in Web3 is to make Web3 something that is inevitable, because it's simply it's better than Web 2, but you have to get to Web 2 scale. If you can't get to Web 2 scale, then you're wasting your time. Your economies of scale will never work out, because you're going to be, doing user acquisition at $25 just for a random like clicky user. It just never works. We have to scale.
Where this market lies is getting Web 2 folks onto Web 3, paving a path for them and make them understand, like either you do it on the price point, like that is something which I really feel like you do it on the price point and that's how you can win this game, or you won't. Like that's the reality. Like
it's definitely bridging together. I've been in the Web3. I'm an enterprise background, so I've been in the Web3 space for almost 2 years now, and I can even say I've seen a change since then. There was a big, we don't want to work with Web3, but when you start to look at like Exhibits, the data centers we work with are SOC 2 compliant. Some of them have HIPAA compliancy. So when you offer the reliability of Web 2 and the price of Web 3, enterprise customers are like, there's nothing wrong with that. Right. So you can serve, when we serve both communities, and I really see it starting to narrow as we go forward.
But do you really think, like, do we have something against like hyperscalers? Because hyperscalers are being involved in a larger volume. Like that's what the game is, right? They stick more consumers in, then prove in more larger volumes. And how do
CoreWeave
you
turns
break that
away.
market?
CoreWeave turns away, dozens of customers every month that we would love to have at Exhibit. So, if you're that startup company and you need a couple of, H200 servers, some of the big people are just not interested. It's blah for them. So that's the kind of business that I think fuels companies like Exhibits, where
Yeah.
we look at how can we get a lot of those customers online distributed. So I do think that's why there's a play for us. Corey signed OpenAI, so that's what
Yeah.
they're interested in. And if you come and especially in the Web3 world, where you get some people even need, like, I need a couple of GPUs, not even a server. So we do things like open APIs to be able to allow people to come on and use 2 or 3 GPUs at a time in a dynamic fashion, and that fuels that development, right? Not everyone's needs as a startup are static; they have
Yeah.
dynamic needs. So
Yeah.
that's why we're so much more valuable to those companies than the big centralized providers.
And somebody who's starting in like right now, like how would you
Yep.
make sure that customer jumps in and like doesn't really think about hyperscalers? Like because most of it is definitely like I don't know, like you guys have been into the business longer than me, and like what I see is that there is a lot of honeypot that happens, and then vendor lock-in kicks in, and it's like a flywheel, right? Like, okay, I have uh my clusters made on AWS. I'm just going to be on AWS. GCP, it's going to be like storage is around GCP, because it's the whole flywheel is a suite of products, right? It's just not
Yeah.
one thing. Like compute sits in as one thing that you need, but then there is storage, and then there is like different functions they use. So how do you really feel, like what are the things uh like for players like us, like that is something which we can definitely identify, just not on the price point, but also on like on the
It
deep
is
in.
definitely hard. Yeah, I
Yes.
mean, GCP, Azure, Amazon are very sticky. The DevOps guys get on there, they get the storage, they get the managed Kubernetes, they get the auto scaling, they get
Yeah.
all that. Like, okay, we don't want to roll off. So, um, price points becomes a differentiator. The ability to work with them. Uh, that's why I think, and this is one thing that's great about Web3, our ecosystem partners. Like in Web3, we're all about ecosystems. So we partner with people who do managed Kubernetes, who do data
Yeah.
storage, whether it's a Backblaze or a Vast.ai or, an ICN. Those are all, data providers. So for us, it's about building those partnerships. And if you're really okay with looking at that ecosystem, you're going to get the best of breed of a whole bunch of different things. You're going to get very attentive players, and you're going to get a much better, efficiency in terms of cost. So we rely a lot on our ecosystem partners to bring the same things together that a monolithic, AWS or Google provide.
And what's your uh in on this, Jason?
Sorry, I was reading a message. What was the question? My apologies.
Well, it's
The
about,
question is,
the big providers are very sticky, right? You get
Right.
on
Yeah.
there,
Yeah.
they offer everything, and how do you
How do
entice them to what we offer, to give them the same things?
for us the main, well, there's two things. The first is that we're able to fill a sort of interesting niche that you won't necessarily be able to get in other ways, even with AWS and things like that. Like AWS will handle really small clients, but it's very difficult to have a sort of AWS plan that's really honestly actually sort of pay as you go, which is something that you can get working with us, where it's like a,
Yeah.
okay, well, how much compute did you actually use? Not did your thing run away from you, and did you forget, like, oh my god. And then don't even start me on the support thing. Like, my AWS account was hacked a couple months ago, Okay. And I haven't
Yeah.
used AWS in forever, so I didn't have anything deployed on it, and it wasn't like they were messing my stuff up, but they got into my AWS account and they deployed a bunch of GPUs. Okay. And they had turned on my 2FA, and so I couldn't even get back into my account to disable the thing. It took me a month and a half of literally emailing
Yeah.
AWS 2 times a day to get them to finally, after a month, they're like, look, we've concluded that it was not you that, activated this. I'm like, really? No shit. Like, I wasn't in Vietnam at that time. You're kidding me, right? Um, and then I finally got it fixed, and yeah, it was terrible. But
Did you lose money in
with
that?
no, I didn't. They
You
rolled
hope.
back all the charges and things like that. But
Yeah.
I very easily could have.
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
and
I hear that all the
with
time. If you're too small, I go up to people. Yeah, Azure promised us this GCP, but I'm too small. They won't give us dedicated support. They just keep
yep,
pushing web pages to me. Yeah.
yeah, or you get stuck in the absolutely ridiculous AI bot chat thing that just goes in a circle. It's
Yeah.
just this
Yeah.
terrible grind.
Over.
You're like pushing the Sisyphean support boulder up a mountain just to get crushed again by it as soon as the AI reaches the end of its iteration and comes back again of like, hey, it sounds like you need help with this problem. It's terrible. But for me, the community and the service side of things is really really important. And for us, the way that we look at some of this is based on we have what we refer to as the entrepreneurial metagame. Okay, which is this idea that you have people who provide infrastructure, you have people that own licenses, and you have people that use and deploy products on this infrastructure, and these are all basically separate cohorts, right? And in in the Web3 space, and then more broadly in sort of the Web 2 and Web3 adjacent development spaces, being able to have a very active community of people that come together and help people figure things out and help people get over the hump to, better understand what is being built and what can be done, is really hugely important. And that's one of the things that we have that I think differentiates and sets what we're doing apart from, sort of the big players. Because if you drop into our Discord, and there's a bunch of people from our Discord watching this right now, if you drop into our Discord, you can ask me a question directly, and I'll actually answer your question. And it's like that. It will that's not going to be a thing that changes. And good luck getting that sort of support from AWS.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I
But
agree with
support
you on
is
that.
on not just one thing. Like we can beat this on. Like I have my own set of
Oh, there's so
apprehensions
many
because
big
they are too
ways.
big. Yeah, there are
Yeah.
there are too big to do that. Like right now, there is one thing like we can provide better support. We can do like I think there is something which comes in is trust and verification, right? Because at the end of the day, they are spinning up a data center and doing that. Like how do we do that on the deep inside? Like what are the things which you guys have been using, like proof of location, proof of uptime, or something like very specific to your own ecosystem and to your own protocol or technology? Okay, this is what we do, and this is really different from what others have been doing. And as you said, it's a very collaborative space. And like I ping Russ all the time for different machines, so like I
Yeah.
want to like I just so but that's how it really works. But like what's that? I'm not gonna say it's a secret sauce. It's like like there is this special mint sauce you get at a specific restaurant. Like what's that? Like what's your specific
What's,
mint sauce for
what's our mint sauce? What's your mint sauce, Russ? You get to answer the mint sauce question first.
My mint sauce. So one of the things that I think that separates us is our founders and our team. We're data center centric people, right? Our founders are ex telecom guys that come from data centers. We partner with data center companies, so In some cases, we actually sell the GPUs to the data center, and then we're the ones who rack them, mount them, install them, cable them, and manage them for them. So, we're really good at managing, building very reliable architectures using GPU acceleration, so that when they come time to integrate with us, it's like we're the hands-on guys, right? So we're not taking compute from another provider or a crypto miner or somebody that we don't know about. So our secret sauce is, hey, we're the hands-on guys, we're the data center guys, so we can really help. So and it's challenging sometimes because someone will come to us and go, "Oh, we want an RTX, but we can get this price elsewhere." And we're like, "Well, we've done some hardware acceleration for some performance and reliability, so maybe our RTX isn't the lowest, but you're going to get a better price for performance and reliability." So that's kind of what we offer, and that's a good play for Web 2 when they hear that we're the ones actually managing and we get our hands on the GPUs.
Yeah. So I think that if you
It's
our
amazing.
special mint sauce, as it were, is essentially our co-founder. Okay, Dr. William Nguyen has been working in this space for a long freaking time. He was doing stuff for DPIN. I mean, Russ, you were probably just like me. You were in DPIN way before they came up with a term called DPIN, and you probably got sent a Cointelegraph article and like DPIN is the next big thing, and you're like, "Fuckers, I've
Been
been
doing
doing
this for
it for
years.
years. Why is this? Why is it the next big thing? Come on." No, but what Dr. William has been doing this since I was like 10. So, I was very interested in Legos at the time, still am, to be completely honest. But, from the mid 90s, Dr. William has been working on decentralized and distributed compute. He originally started working on it at Lawrence Livermore Labs in California, and then went on to continue his work in distributed and parallel computing for computational biology at Harvard Med, and then later as a Sloan Fellow. So the dude has like impeccable credentials building in the space, um, like decades before there was a space. And
Wow.
a lot of our tech is based on some of the cutting edge work that he's done. So it's pretty cool. That is our special mint sauce, as it were. I don't know how he
It's
would feel about being referred to as mint sauce, but we'll roll with it.
I think like both of you gave it to your teammates, and that's I think that's what
Yeah.
a standpoint of this ecosystem really lies in, like specifically deep end, because I feel like everybody over here in this stream has been doing deep end before it was called deep end. Like it was just a term which was coined. Like I remember back in the day, I was laughing with my teammates. Like now they call it deep end. Like what's next? Like what do they call it now? And that's have been like funny when we look at the past, but like when we look at the future, like there is a specific report which anybody can access it right now. And before I jump onto that question, I would just tell that two H100s are not the same, two 4090s are not the same. That is something you need to understand in terms of price points, in terms of connectivity, in terms of hardware type, in terms of a lot of things which really comes in. I don't know, this has become like rant of the deep ends, but yeah, like but once you guys come in, and anybody who comes in, that there is a big difference between XSM and PCIe. There is a big difference between InfiniBand and Ethernet. So you need to
Yeah.
understand that there are different types of, like, once everybody jumps in and says, "Oh, we are getting this
It's
at this
not
dollar
just
rate."
that. I mean, they
Yeah,
have AMD chips in and the Intel CPU and how much storage and RAM are on the GPUs. It's
exactly.
amazing how many different types of each GPU there actually are.
Yeah,
Yeah.
the PNC is insane.
Yeah, yeah.
So that
So someone talks about decentralized and oh, I'm going to build a cluster from GPUs from several places. It's possible, but it's not efficient, right? So companies have proved out that you can build a cluster from different GPUs, but then you're going to get inefficiencies. You're going to, whatever the lowest latency is, or the lowest, speed is, that's going to be the speed and latency and performance of the entire cluster. So I like to think of it as, you can serve a decentralized workload by having a distributed architecture to serve that workload in different places.
Exactly. So I was going through this report which says AI 2027, and it is mostly around like how things are going to be in 2027 and how compute is going to shift, because most of these big conglomerates out there, they're trying to procure as much compute as they can. Like we speak of Microsoft, Google, and anybody. And for this, like intelligence becomes as a core economic primitive, right? And it acts in a way like, for example, if I'm querying anything on ChatGPT, or I'm using any kind of LLM, or anything that is happening on top of it, at the end of the day, it sits in with compute. But do you really think like deepen infra would be able to shift that rapidly onto like open source models? And because right now we are at stage 0 or stage 1, and deepen infra was ready to take on so much compute, like as of today. Like if I see that there are different distilled models and any open source models that can easily be run on deepen infra, and there are no issues with it. But now this has actually become a fight, if people don't know. Like this is an invisible fight which only capital and few lobbyists see right now, but we are giving you like this as a heads up. So but this fight has into like something which has grown out to like people who control most of the compute, and then the models. So how do you see like deepen growing into a stem or a segment which is good enough, or scalable enough for different businesses, anything that has to do with LLMs? Like how do you think we would shape that?
I think it's going to be a challenge. So I think that the vision is there, right? It has to eventually, where we want to get to is, the analogy I'll use is when you plug in your lamp and you get power, right? You don't think about where that power is coming from. It's coming from your
Yeah.
local, power company. We want to be the same thing for GPUs. We want people to not have to think about, where they're going to get compute from. We want it to be so ubiquitous and so distributed that, you plug in and you get your GPU power. That's our vision. You have, MCP servers, that automatically spin up GPUs as you need it. They find the location, the latency, whatever it means, is you don't have to think about it. Whether we do it by 2027, that's a challenge. Like we need a lot of distributed compute in a lot of
Yeah.
places to be able to do that. And whether it's a 2027 or 2030 goal, it's definitely going to be a challenge to get there, especially if these companies keep buying up all the compute around the world.
Yeah.
I think it's that scene in Jurassic Park where Dr. Malcolm or whatever is saying life always finds a way, right? I think that you're going to see something similar to that, and I think that the major innovations here aren't going to come from infrastructure. I think they're going to come from the models themselves, and I think we're already beginning to see some shifts in the way that the LLMs work.
Yeah.
The heavy lift, obviously, okay, is the training, right? Inference is heavy, but not nearly as much as training, obviously. And I think
Yeah.
that what we're beginning to see is a sort of logical sharding of the inference, okay, where even OpenAI was introducing some of the micro model stuff. where you ask ChatGPT a question. ChatGPT looks at the question. They have one model that says, okay, what the hell is it that you want to talk about? And then they toss it over to a much smaller, more optimized model specifically for that task. So you may get
Yeah.
the accounting model or the medical model or the architecture model or whatever it is that you get
much
that
more specialized. Yeah.
correct. Now that is something that is much more easily decentralized, not because like the whole process is less complex, but because you can house those models in different places with minimal latency. And the reality is, especially when you're working with LLMs, the data, the latency issue is minor if your compute is being performed in a single source. So your prompt that goes into an LLM is what, a couple of bytes. You're asking a question, a kilobyte max, and your answer that comes out of an LLM is also a kilobyte. So the movement and latency there on that specific piece of data as it moves back and forth is very, very small, unless you're uploading large files and stuff like that, obviously. But your all of the work stays inside that single machine. And so as long as you're able to keep that isolated to, a card or a couple of cards in a single place, then that is something that you can actually share out to a bunch of different places without, major disruption.
Do you think any models are doing that right now? Like, do you
Yes.
think?
I absolutely
Oh.
think there are. I mean, some of the stuff that I've played with, I know, again, OpenAI is definitely playing with it.
Yeah.
There's some llama permutations that are doing stuff like this where you're essentially, it's not a singular model. What you have is you have a cluster of models, each of which is trained on a specific set of data, and then you have another model that acts as a gating mechanism that decides which model to serve out your request to. So it's really just a logical structure of different LLMs that are all talking to each other and passing data back and forth.
And in terms of actually go to market, there is a lot of red ocean that has happened in decentralized inference right now, but not decentralized. Like even today, we see that there are a lot of people who are doing decentralized inference, and specifically AI agents have picked up a lot. That's good for compute, honestly. If I speak just from the compute business, yes. But who do you think really beats the pie completely? Decentralized training, federated learning, or inference? Who do you think?
I don't think decentralized training works on at this point in time, because training is where the latency really kills you, right? Because the way that training a model works, and to put it into brutally simple terms, if you were to have you're training and this is a stupid simple analogy, and I apologize for all of the people who are extremely technically competent and will realize it for the bullshit analogy it is, but I'm going to go ahead and go with it, right? If you're training an AI to make a cat, okay, what the AI does is what your model does is it essentially makes a cat and then looks at the cat and compares it to the other cats that it's seen that are actual, validated cats, okay, and says, this isn't a cat, this is terrible, try again. Okay. And what that requires is a ton of passing data back and forth. And so, that's sort of part of the training, component. And it is not easy to do when you add in really, really high latency, or if you start putting things in different places and different continents and stuff like that, it just gets really slow.
So it really depends on so I feel that decentralized, because there are few people who have jumped on the bandwagon of decentralized training. I can say it from a perspective of GPUs, go ahead, use all the GPUs. But Russ, what do you feel is the biggest the biggest users of exabits right now, or the biggest customers of exabits sits in? Are they doing training, inferencing, modeling? Like, what's the biggest
I would say
piece of the
right
pie?
now, inferencing, generative AI and inferencing. So a lot of our partners that we have, I'd say inferencing probably, in terms of the most number of customers. You got to remember, I can have one large Web 2 customer doing one computer vision project, which could use as much GPUs as 10 Web 3 projects doing inferencing. But if I look at the sheer number of customers that I have, more of them are providing inferencing using our
Yeah,
GPUs.
that's like right now. Do you think the pie sits in on inferencing and it's going to move to something more unique than this, or because like the whole agentic side, like right now everybody is like I'm being completely honest here. Everybody is on the hyperscalers who are doing agents and who are doing like some of have moved to like DEs and specific use cases like verified agents and all of that like are doing DEs for
I
sure.
think what Jason said. So what I see, like I go to these conferences and I see like hundreds of different startups, and they're all building a unique agent. So I think, as you get more companies building more specialized agents, I think that's what you'll start to see coming off the
Yeah,
hyperscalers. Like, hey, I'm a small
true.
startup. I'm building an agent that's just for logistic and transportation and nothing else,
Exactly.
right?
Yeah.
Um, and they're going to need smaller compute needs, and they're not going to want to go to a hyperscaler. So I think as your agents become more specialized, I think those players might be, off of the hyperscalers, and I
Yeah.
definitely see.
Like that's a
Years ago
that's
you
a
had,
long road.
yeah,
Honestly, like
years ago
you gotta wait out.
I come from the speech recognition industry, and years ago you had 4 or 5 players, right, who did
Yeah.
speech recognition, and now there's 100 conversational AI companies offering chatbots and everything else very uniquely specific,
Yeah.
carving out a niche. So the
Yeah.
agents are going to be the same thing. I can't imagine how many different agent applications there can be. So I think all of them are going to be very small, unique applications.
Gentlemen, I hate to break in here, but I got to drop off because I have a hard stop.
Yeah, for
So I will
sure.
leave you
We
guys
are
to this.
just
Thank
wrapping
you so
up.
much.
Yeah.
Yeah, like so let's do like wrap up time. So
I have
you
to
get
drop
this
now,
book.
so I'll let you
Yeah,
guys go.
okay. I get that.
Yeah.
Thank
Okay.
you guys so much.
Yeah, thanks Jason for being here.
Thank you guys.
So Russ, please go ahead and tell us more about exhibits and things you have been working on, anything specifically people should look ahead and for coming days. That's something we should focus on.
Yeah, I mean, we're focusing on advancements in data center technology. Like, so we want to be a big player as countries and providers and stuff build data centers. We want to be part of that newer technology so that we can serve more GPUs to more customers in more places around the world. And then some of the things, how do we do it better, how do we do it cleaner, how do we do it greener? Those are all the things that we're interested in doing. And one of the things I think that makes us a very good option is, CoreWeave and Lambda Labs and these customers, they'll buy massive amounts of GPUs, but then they'll have the cycle time where they've rented out everything that they have, and then they lack the flexibility to add more compute with exabytes. And because we have such a huge partnership with data centers, we're always able to I'm going to say find compute because we have so many partners around the world. So I think that flexibility gives us the ability to supply more GPUs, work in more locations, as you said, find more of the options between PCIe and NVLink and InfiniBand. So that's what we're about, is really providing a global network of more options to our customers.
I think that's the best way to put this forward. Like in terms of this market mechanics,
Yep.
like this becomes like one of the biggest things anybody can offer to people who are building and started building. And thank you
Yeah.
so much for being a great ecosystem partner.
Yeah.
We are proud to be working with you guys and
And the same thing
moving
with
ahead.
Spheron. It's fantastic, and that's why I got into this. So
Yeah,
just real quickly, I spent 20 years doing AI, and there was a time I would provide training data to AI
yeah,
companies, big and small. And what I saw was the big companies had access to compute and they could afford it. The smaller companies, you know how many times they would put off their training or their model development because A, they didn't have access to compute. If you go back a couple of
yeah,
years, they couldn't get it or they couldn't afford it. So when I saw exhibits, I'm like, you know what? This is an opportunity for me to help those smaller AI companies, you know,
yeah.
compete on a fair playing field.
Exactly. Like
So,
that's the
and
idea of Web3. Like,
and Spheron's helping us do that through your ecosystem as well too.
absolutely. I think that's the whole core focus of us. That's how we
Yeah,
can fight these hyperscalers. And thank you so much for being here, Russ. Always
absolutely.
amazing to have you on
Thank you
this.
very
And
much. Enjoyed it.
people who are watching this, you know where to go if you want to find GPUs. Thanks for having us. Have a good one.